Hey everybody, welcome into the Alabama Recruiting Show. I'm Hannah Chalker alongside SEC Country's Alabama recruiting reporter, Chris Kirshner. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Big win for the Crimson Tide on Saturday against SEC West foe LSU. And this was the game, in my opinion. It was time for the Crimson Tide to shut up the haters. I mean, everyone has been saying, oh man, their schedule isn't great. But did they prove people wrong with the 24-10 win?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's still a big win for Alabama. Anytime you can beat a rival like LSU, a ranked opponent, it's definitely a big-time win for them. Yes, it wasn't, a blowout victory that Alabama has had this season, but to beat a team that was ranked coming into this game and beat them handedly. In my opinion, there wasn't really any concern on Alabama's end if they were going to win or not. They just blew out, they didn't blow LSU out, but they really controlled that game from start to finish. So there wasn't really a worry of Alabama actually losing. Yeah,
and LSU has so much momentum, really tested the Tide, and Alabama came on top again. The final score 24-10, but most of you guys know that. All right, well, what an impressive way. 6 wins in a row against LSU, and this has been a long-time rivalry between these two schools. Who did Alabama impress? Who was on the sidelines? Potential recruits? Who was on the sidelines during this game?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of recruits in Tuscaloosa this past weekend. It was a really, really crowded event for Alabama, so much so that the actual section that recruits sit in, it was overflowing. So some of those recruits had to sit elsewhere. Alabama had to make other arrangements for those guys just because of how many recruits were on campus. Some of the big names: 4-star linebacker Brandon Cahoe, he was committed to BYU. Savion Smith, 4-star cornerback from the junior college ranks. Tanner McKee, 4-star quarterback. 4-star wide receiver commit Jacob Copeland. So there were lots of names. A lot of Alabama's commitments were in town. It was definitely a very, very crowded weekend in Tuscaloosa.
Let's start with Jacob Copeland. You said it, the 4-star wide receiver who's actually committed to Florida right now, and he committed on the SEC Country site, committing to Florida earlier this year. So what was he doing in Tuscaloosa on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, it was his 3rd time actually in Tuscaloosa this fall. If I was a Gators fan, I think it's time to start worrying about what Jacob Copeland is going to do at this point. It was his 3rd visit to Tuscaloosa this fall, and with the way Florida's program is right now, it's pretty much in shambles. Fired Jim McElwain. A lot of staff turnover is going to be expected for that Gators staff. So if I was a Florida fan, it's probably time to start worrying about Jacob Copeland flipping from Florida to Alabama. I was told by a few people close to the Alabama program that it's not a matter of if Copeland is going to flip from Florida, but it's a matter of when. Alabama is under the impression right now that Copeland is going to wait until the season is over. The college football season, that is, when Florida is expected to get their new coach. Perhaps he has some sort of relationship with that guy. Perhaps he has a relationship with the wide receivers coach that the head coach will bring in. So as of now, I expect Jacob Copeland to be wearing a Crimson Tide jersey in 2018. And like I said, it's a matter of when he's actually going to decide to flip from Florida to Alabama.
David Sprinkle Sr. on Facebook says, who is the 4-star? Maybe that's who he was mentioning. We were talking about 4-star wide receiver Jacob Copeland, so maybe that answers your question. David and fans, keep your comments rolling all show long. Chris here will answer your questions, and we'll take all out of your comments about what you think about the game or the 2018 commits, 2019 commits, so we'll get there. Chris Kirshner, I'm Hannah Chalker. Moving right along, and another fun storyline that I thought for this game was Savion Smith. So top cornerback target for Alabama. He is a former LSU cornerback, transferred from LSU to Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College over the summer. So he was in Tuscaloosa as well. So what is this guy Alabama's to lose at this point? Where does he fit into the mix?
Yeah, I think he is Alabama's to lose at this point. It was his 3rd time in Tuscaloosa this fall since transferring from LSU over the summer. And pretty much when he got that offer from Alabama, I believe it was in August, he's pretty much been projected to sign with the Crimson Tide when he makes his commitment and signs his letter of intent. He took an official visit this past weekend, And it's clear that Alabama feels very, very confident that it will land Savion Smith, the former LSU cornerback. And I just think it's like a little, interesting for Smith to be on the Alabama sidelines this year instead of LSU's, because, like you said, he was, a part of the Tigers program last year. He knows those guys. He's friends with those guys. So it's definitely interesting to see where Smith will land. And I do think, I'm very, very confident that Savion Smith will be one of Alabama's cornerbacks in the 2018 season. It's just a matter of when he actually wants to decide. I recently spoke with Savion Smith, and he told me that he's waiting for his season to end and for him to officially know that he's done with junior college, and so he can be 100% sure that he will be transferring to an FBS school when that time comes.
What a weird dynamic for Savion. He already went through the recruiting process,
right,
committed to LSU, played at LSU, right, and now he's back on the sidelines as a recruit for Alabama. Mm-hmm. Like, I just can't imagine there. But let's go to another cornerback that you think should already be committed to Alabama, or would have already committed to Alabama. That's Nadab Joseph. And what's interesting about this is that he was actually in Tuscaloosa today. He stayed all weekend, and his official visit was today. What's the update on him? When will he commit?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of days now for Nadab Joseph. I know I said on last week's show that I expected him to commit by today. He didn't. He stayed in Tuscaloosa through today, so he's going back home to Miami. I'm sure he may take a few days to process the visit, but I fully expect Nadab Joseph to be, like Savion Smith, I expect him to be one of Alabama's cornerbacks in the 2018 class. It's just a matter of when he actually wants to decide. It wouldn't be surprising at all to see him go ahead and make a decision in these next few days. Alabama, again, feels very, very confident that it will land Nadab Joseph. He's been targeted by the Crimson Tide for several months now. A guy like Savion Smith has ties to the LSU program. Nadab Joseph was committed to the Tigers before decommitting from LSU earlier this year, and it really didn't come as too much of a surprise. I was actually surprised that when he decommitted from LSU, he just didn't flip from LSU to Alabama at that time, because the Crimson Tide were trending for about 2 months prior to him actually going ahead and decommitting from the Tigers. So I do expect Nadab Joseph to be a part of Alabama's class sooner rather than later, and that's just going to be a big-time win for Alabama on the recruiting trail, just because Alabama is in really desperate need of cornerbacks in this 2018 class. They didn't sign any true corners in the 2017 class. They're going to lose Anthony Averett, Levi Wallace, Tony Brown, not to mention they're probably going to have to replace Ronnie Harrison and Minkah Fitzpatrick. So there's going to be a lot of holes in Alabama's secondary in the 2018 season.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I believe that Minkah Fitzpatrick, of course, he's a junior, but I think he's going to the NFL. So definitely a weak spot on the Alabama defense. But let's head back over to the offensive side of the ball. We've got a ton of commenters, Chris, talking about Emory Jones already. We were gonna wait a little bit to go there, but let me read some of the comments. Dale Howell says, "What's the latest on Emory Jones?" Matt Ballone says, "How much longer can we expect Emory Jones to drag out his recruitment? It feels like he's been doing this, to us personally, of course, forever." I mean, Emory Jones, make up your mind. But before we get to that conversation, we're gonna leave you on the hook a little bit. Let's talk about another one of Alabama's top quarterback targets. That's Tanner McKee. You actually got a chance to speak to Tanner. What did he say to you?
Yeah, I think Tanner really loves Alabama. It's just a matter of if he wants to leave the West Coast. He's from California. He goes to Centennial High School. Lots of West Coast teams are in the mix for him. Stanford, he's a very, very smart kid. But I had a chance to talk to Tanner McKee last night. He told me that he's really impressed with the amount of preparation that Alabama has. It reminds him of what he goes through on a day-to-day basis at Centennial High School, and he really likes that. He really loves how Alabama focuses on the smallest details. For official visits, the day after the game, the recruits go to Nick Saban's house and have brunch with him and his wife Terry, so he got a really good chance to interact with Coach Saban and get a feel for just how personable of a guy he is. I know a lot of times you watch these interviews and Nick Saban may get a little testy with reporters, but from talking with the recruits, they really like how personable of a guy he is. So McKee is definitely interested in Alabama. Alabama. The interesting part about him is that he's technically a 2020 prospect. He's going to take a 2-year Mormon mission trip after graduating high school. So he's planning on making a decision on signing day. He will not sign a letter of intent. He will do so in the year of 2020 when he gets back from his mission trip.
Okay, so that brings us to Emory Jones. If Tanner commits to Alabama, what does that do to the Tide's pursuit of Emory Jones?
Yeah, I don't really think it affects it that much just because Tanner is a 2020 prospect essentially. So by the time by the time Tanner enrolls, Emory could be a junior by that point. So it's not really a big deal for Alabama's chances of landing Emory Jones. The thing with Emory Jones is that yes, he took a visit to Alabama. He's taken multiple visits to Alabama, I believe 4 now, not including the season opener against Florida State. He took the official visit to Ohio State last weekend for the Penn State game. From talking to people close to the Ohio State program, they're definitely worried. The Buckeyes offered 4-star quarterback Jaron Williams, who's committed to Kentucky. Anytime a program goes ahead and offers another quarterback when they have one already and they're not planning on taking 2, that just tells you that Ohio State is definitely worried that they're going to lose Emory Jones at some point. Now, from talking with Heard County head coach Tim Barron, who is Emory Jones' high school coach, it seems like Emory is waiting to make a final decision until his season is complete. He's really focused on, potentially taking Heard County to the state championship game, playing out his last few games in high school. So right now, it doesn't seem likely that a decision from Emory Jones is going to happen this month unless Heard County, gets eliminated from the playoffs. And at that point, his recruiting process could accelerate. But I still expect Emory Jones to be Alabama's 2018 quarterback when it's all said and done.
Patrick Baldwin on our Facebook Live comment section says Nick Saban's a great coach, but an even better recruiter. Absolutely, totally believe that. Maybe that'll bring everybody Emory Jones. So I hope that answers your question with what Chris was just saying. We have a lot of commenters and questions, so we'll get to that in just a minute. But I know we mentioned Jacob Copeland earlier, and he's already committed to Florida. But now we have an Auburn commit, Cantus Miller, also on the sidelines this weekend. He committed to Auburn completely. He did the whole video deal, had the family there. So he's another player, which makes me question, why was he in Tuscaloosa? And this video cracks me up because his dad's a big Alabama fan. Does not even crack a smile here. So has he changed his mind?
Yeah, I think it's possible
Look
that.
At his dad.
Yeah, it's. As a father, you have to be happy for your son, even though he's going to your rival school that you don't like. But Cantus's dad, looking at that video, he definitely was not pleased with his son's decision going to choose Auburn. But yeah, Cantus was in town this past weekend, got a lot of time to spend with the coaching staff, where it was again expressed to him that he is a top defensive tackle target for this year. And Alabama really needs several elite defensive linemen, especially interior defensive linemen, because of the amount of depth Alabama has. It's just not that deep when you look at the 2018 roster. So yes, Cantus was actually, he took his dad's side in this rivalry. His mom is an Auburn fan, his dad is an Alabama fan, and Cantus growing up was an Alabama fan, but he ultimately chose Auburn when he committed. So I think there's a chance to flip Cantus Miller from Auburn, but it's going to be difficult. I think the only way Alabama really changes Cantus's mind is that, who knows what happens in these next few games for Auburn. If they're blown out by Georgia and Alabama at the end of the season, perhaps Auburn starts to look in a different direction with its head coach and gets rid of Gus Malzahn. But, Cantus is really close with defensive line coach Rodney Gardner as well. So if Gardner stays in Auburn, if Auburn makes a coaching change, I still think he follows through with his commitment and signs with the Tigers. But right now, Alabama definitely feels like it has a chance to flip Cantus Miller, but it's a small one at this time.
Is this part of the reason for the new early signing period that we're going to have in December for the first time this year? Because a lot of these players are making commitments, but then they're still looking elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So are coaches wanting to get their names signed on the dotted line because of this?
Yeah, I think that definitely plays some part. I think it's going to be interesting to see how these schools go through coaching changes and coaching hires, because The early signing period is December 20th, and a lot of these schools have double-digit commitments. So if there's not a coach in place, or there's a possibility of the school firing the coach, it's going to be interesting to see what these kids do come December 20th, which is the first day of the early signing period. If there's any doubt of the coach possibly getting fired, or who knows who they're going to hire, it's going to be interesting to see if those verbal commitments actually go ahead and sign with their school come that first day of the early signing period.
So with that, who do you think will sign or enroll early?
Yeah, there are several guys that Alabama currently has on its roster. Four-star offensive tackle Tommy Brown, four-star Jack linebacker Cameron Latou, Jordan Davis is another guy, Stephon Wynn, four-star defensive end, four-star wide receiver Xavier Williams. All those guys are currently planning on signing with Alabama during that early signing period. I know the Crimson Tide expect the majority of its current verbal commitments to go ahead and sign on that during that 3-day window where these recruits can sign, just because after that early signing period, those guys are they're done. Their recruitment is officially over. They don't need to be recruited anymore. We already know that they're going to play for Alabama in 2018. So I think we're going to see a lot of schools pressed for their verbal commitments to go ahead and sign during that early signing period.
Awesome. It's Chris Kirshner. I'm Hannah Chalker. We're going to get to your Facebook Live comments now. We've got a lot of comments and questions rolling in, and a lot of people from watching all over. Gene Rainey is watching from Pennsylvania, so roll tide, Gene. Ray Partham says, any word on top defensive tackle targets that are leaning towards Alabama?
Yeah, I mean, there are several at this time, and I know I mentioned it in a prior show, but defensive tackle is one of Alabama's biggest positions and needs in the 2018 class. There are several guys to keep an eye on. Cantus Miller, who we just mentioned, Bobby Brown, he committed to Texas A&M a few weeks ago over Alabama, and who knows what Texas A&M is going to do with its coaching situation. There's definitely a very good possibility of Kevin Sumlin not returning to the Aggies next season, so potentially a coaching change may change Bobby Brown's mind later on. Christian Barmore, four-star defensive tackle out of Pennsylvania. He's a guy that's strongly considering Alabama. He's expected to take an official visit to Tuscaloosa after the season. Four-star junior college defensive tackle Antoine Jackson. He's currently committed to Ohio State. There are a lot of guys, especially at defensive tackle, who are committed elsewhere that Alabama is trying to flip. It's just a down year across the board when it comes to defensive tackles. So Alabama right now is going through its evaluations. They're circling back to some guys that they are interested in, and possibly seeing if they can bring them in for an official visit either for the Mercer game or after the season. So right now, defensive tackle, it's still very unclear who Alabama will actually get at defensive tackle, just because Alabama has missed on some key guys already.
Linda Clayton Brown says roll tide from Shreveport, Louisiana. And Billy Dyes, roll tide from NOLA. So two Louisiana natives watching. We do have a question here. We'll take just a few more questions. Gene Rainey, what kind of game would it be if Penn State and the Tide would meet again? That kind of brings us off subject, but quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it'd be a good game. I mean, I don't think Penn State has any chance of making it to the playoff now. They have 2 losses, and it's pretty clear that they're not really a playoff contender at this point. But I think it'd be interesting to see if Alabama's rush defense could stop Saquon Barkley, who in my opinion is the best running back in college football, should be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft next season. So it would definitely be an interesting game for sure.
All right, well, Alabama does have 12 commits, and what are your final thoughts on those guys, and who do you pick to be next?
Yeah, I mean, I think Alabama's class, be it they have only 12 commitments, but they do have a bunch of really solid players on the current team right now, a current commit list. So it's definitely an elite class. I expect it to get better. As far as your next question, I do think 4-star cornerback Nadab Joseph will be the Tide's next commitment in the 2018 class. All
right, and Alabama has Mississippi State up next, number 16 Mississippi State. That's this Saturday at 7 p.m. in Starkville. So that'll be another good one to watch. Any commits that you know of that are going to be there?
Yeah, not right now. You know, it's always a little weird for you know, another program to host another program's commitments, especially if they're not really considering that school. And right now, Alabama's current commitments are not you know, talking to Mississippi State, so it's probably unlikely that any current commitments will be in Starkville this upcoming weekend.
I'll take a few more comments. Ron Summer says, watching from Brentwood, Tennessee. Hey, Ron, he wants to know who will commit in the next week. You kind of just touched on that, who you thought would be next. But Ricky Cochran says, is Jerome Ford higher on the board than Martin right now?
Yeah, I do think Jerome Ford, three-star running back from Tampa, Florida. He is the team's top uncommitted running back target. As far as if he's higher on the board than four-star running back Asa Martin, who's currently committed to Auburn. You know, Alabama would definitely love to flip Asa Martin from Auburn, but again, like Cantus Miller, I think there's going to have to be a coaching change for Asa to change his mind. So right now, Jerome Ford is the guy that they're really pursuing strongly. He has a top two of Alabama and South Florida. He's from Tampa. I know there are a lot of people in his circle who would like for him to stay closer to home, so we'll see. But as of now, I do expect Jerome Ford to be a part of Alabama's 2018 class.
And lastly, Jamel Hampton says Bama has the top recruiting class, hands down. Everyone wants to be a Roll Tide. Absolutely. So everyone's going to want to come back here and watch our show every week to get all of the latest with our SEC Alabama recruiting reporter, Chris Kirshner. Chris, where can people find more information, though, when they're not live on our show?
Yeah, just go to secountry.com, click Alabama on the top of the screen. Make sure you guys click recruiting, and all of our recruiting work will be there. You can also follow me on Twitter at Chris Kirshner.
Awesome. And I'm at Hannah Chalker. Catch us here every week for all of the latest in Alabama recruiting. Thanks so much for watching the Alabama Recruiting Show on SEC Country.